And we're live. So
Ta-da.
JD, we're just going to literally have a minute because we're literally going to have a minute, and I'm going to press go live here, and then we're going to start. So if anybody's joined, be aware we're just having our initial chit chat to make sure everything's working. And it says the screen says the event will start soon. Wait for the host to start. We'll literally have a minute because we're literally going to have a minute. And that's testing it. So we are live and it's working.
Ta-da.
So let's go ahead and start.
Sounds good.
So firstly, everybody that's watching either directly or they're watching the replay, thank you very much. It is very much appreciated that you're taking part. I'm going to introduce myself very briefly and then introduce my guest JD and let him introduce himself a little bit more. I'm Michael. I'm a one-to-one Richard Bandler NLP trainer and a Marshall Goldsmith Stakeholder Center coach, and I work one-to-one with professional people worldwide, small number of professional people worldwide, something that I really enjoy doing. So that's me, and I'm really pleased to have JD with us today. One of my hobbies, I think that's the right word, is how people are using AI as individuals and how companies are using AI. And I think it's an absolutely fascinating subject. And from my perspective, JD is one of the top people on this, so I'm really pleased he's here. There's two things that I hold in mind from him. One is he wrote a book called Getting Results the Agile Way, which we'll talk about later, but it's sort of changed my life in some aspects. And the other one, he has worked at the very top of Microsoft for a long time and was head of Satella's innovation team. So JD, would you just say a few more words about you and give the audience a sort of reminder of who you are?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So whenever I introduce myself, I usually start with I help leaders change the world. It kind of sets the context. Been at Microsoft for 25 years, had a 25-year journey, learned a lot. And I also wrote the bestseller book, Getting Results the Agile Way. It's a productivity system. And what makes me come alive is helping leaders figure out their future for real, creating business impact in a sustainable way that's uniquely them, and really changing the world in a better way. I like to focus on good for people, good for the planet, and using that as my lens. I like to help leaders not just explore, but expand the art of the possible and become the greatest version both of themselves and what their organization can become.
Okay, that's really great. And just to remind everybody, we're looking at AI and strategy, both from an individual point of view and a corporate organization point of view. So to sort of give us a very top level overview, JD, what do you think are some of the top level challenges that both organizations and people are having at the moment? And then lead that into the sorts of things you enjoy working on and the sorts of companies you enjoy working on. But very top level, what do you think are the top level challenges you will have today?
So when I think about the AI adoption challenge, I mean, that's the real challenge, is I call it fractured AI. People may have AI in different pockets and pieces of their org, but it's fractured. And so it's also an alignment challenge. It's really when the leaders haven't answered the question well, how will you use AI? If you don't answer that question well, it creates a struggle. But I think also that AI is kind of this wrapper that we haven't solved the big data challenge very well. And data is a challenge because it represents power. And whenever you've got cross departments and people power challenges, you're going to have a challenge adopting a technology. And so I think that's kind of at the high level where there's struggle. But then it's also about understanding the business value that you can create as a leader and how you can augment individuals, how you can augment teams, how you can augment departments, and how you can create a better, faster organization that can respond to change and leverage AI to leapfrog ahead. That's really it.
And I really like it. And I almost come back to people have to work together well to implement some of the things that you're talking about. So you can't forget the humans.
Yeah,
you
humans are
can't
a key piece of this. Yeah.
you can't forget the humans in this particular journey. I am going to go back to your book because I said it is a book that's had a profound influence on me for at least a couple of reasons. So firstly, I quite like your metaphor that you were talking about changing about multi-million-pound projects in uncertain times, and when I came to the realization, in many ways, our lives are uncertain projects in
Yeah.
changing times, and it's a very useful and interesting way of how we tackle how we live our lives, and I find that tremendously non-trivial. The second point I find interesting is you were the first one that introduced the idea to me, which it's taken me a long time to realize the importance of, that really energy, time, and focus.
Mm.
If we manage those, these are limited resources, and success in life is very much choosing what we do with them. And I'm really grateful for that being explained in a language that I actually understood and take notice. So let me throw the question back at you. Talk about the top level view of the book, but also how it relates to our subject today, how it relates to AI and strategy.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I created Agile results out of pain. Working at Microsoft, a lot of stress. I was working on multi-million dollar projects, teams around the world. It was a lot of moving parts. And I wanted a simple way to make it through my week, but not just make it through my week. I wanted it meaningful, and I wanted to get better over time. The last thing I wanted was to spend like 10 years, or never imagine 20 years, at Microsoft and not get better over time. So I wanted a learning system. But I also wanted to answer the question, how do you spend your precious life force on things that actually matter? That was the cutting question through everything. And so I focused on focus, I focused on flow, I focused on fulfillment. I wanted to I wanted to embody the idea that you would be able to spend more time in your strengths, less time in your weaknesses. I wanted to embrace the idea that you would be, vision driven, working backwards from outcomes. At the same time, I wanted you to enjoy your journey and give your best where you have your best to give in the service of others. And I wanted you to really be able to find your flow in any situation where you're using your greatest strengths to create your greatest outcomes and enjoying the journey as you go. Those were the big ideas. And to achieve that, I integrated a lot of proven practices from building software, believe it or not, from program management and all that I learned. To me, the ultimate form of productivity is program management. And then I integrated a lot of positive psychology because I wanted this to be sustainable, and sports psychology. I wanted to draw from the greatest on our planet Earth of people who've been able to achieve sustainable high levels of performance and not grind it out, but grow it out. Get the insights that help them get better over time as they do what they do best.
Okay, and let's move on now because we're talking about strategy and AI. And let's start with basics, because I sometimes have long discussions with people and we find out we have different views of what we're talking about, which isn't always useful. So let me ask the very simple question. We're going to say, what is strategy? And then what is AI? So come up with a simple version of strategy and then talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. So with strategy, I was lucky that I had an early mentor that said, strategy is difference. He said, strategy is difference. And it was a very helpful guiding insight. I also find it helpful. There's a lot of great definitions, but I find the definition from Dr. Mark Snydicus helpful too, because he says that strategy is your response to the challenges towards achieving your bold ambitions. I find that that's helpful because you can use it at any level, any domain, any aspect. The thing for me when I focus on strategy is really sustainable value, sustainable differentiating value. So I think of Starbucks in third place.
Yeah.
When they created their third place, they were no longer competing on the price of coffee, which is a race to the bottom. Instead, they found their blue ocean. They found a sustainable source of innovation, a sustainable source of insight. And now they really focused on transforming the experience and the end-to-end, value creation that they could provide in their unique way for their customers. So I think of really as that sustainable, unique value. That to me is a very helpful internal representation of strategy.
Okay, let me go back to my rather simplistic view, and I just want to know if you think it still applies, because I still
Yeah.
go back to strategy is something about where you want to get to, where you are now, coming up with a workable plan with all the resources, and but included in that is being clear about where you want to get to and where you are now, which are non-trivial. So does that still apply, or do you have a different thought?
I absolutely think it still applies because at the end of the day, you want to figure out your winning position, which
Yeah.
is that unique sustainable value, and you want to figure out how you're going to get there. And that's where your differences really can come to shine, playing to your unique strengths, your values, your worldview. So
Right.
it's absolutely it's the winning position that you want to get to, and then how you're going to get there in your unique way.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, and let's move on to AI. A simple, a simple view of AI, and then we'll chat through where it is and where it's going. But let's start with a simple definition, please.
Good point. We got to keep it simple because it gets complex very fast. But if you look across a lot of definitions of AI, they kind of all come back to this idea of simulated intelligence, and
Right,
I think that's helpful, simulated intelligence, but it's not helpful enough. So
right.
when I was trying to figure out, how do I make the most of this disruptive technology? How do I need to think about it differently? How do I internally represent it to myself? And augmented seems to be like the best word that
Okay,
represented what I wanted to achieve with it. Augmented. And then I had to think about it. Well, augmenting what? What can it do? Well, augment thinking, which can lead to, better decisions, can lead to better actions. But I also realized there was a lot of confusion in this space because we've been talking about AI for years, been working on AI for years. Well, what was the old world? It was machine learning, predictive AI. It
right.
was about accuracy. What's this new world, this generative AI? So if you don't differentiate between, predictive AI and generative AI, I think you get into trouble pretty fast because the predictive world is really more about accuracy, whereas the generative AI world is more about innovation and, of course, the realm of hallucinations. But it gives us a different way of working our way through the future with these generative possibilities. It's like truly an engine for us to explore and expand what we see as the art of the possible or the art of our possible.
Okay, and very top level, where do you see people, companies using AI at the moment, and how might that change over the next few years? Where are we on the AI growth and the AI path?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been using it as their own personal, self-discovery. I think of it even
Yeah.
as, bring your own AI. Everybody brings their own AI to work, and which is part of the Fractured AI Challenge. But within that realm, it's about discovering what you can do better. So it's taking a look at your day to day. It's your jobs to be done or your team's jobs to be done, and finding ways to do those better, faster, easier. Finding ways to do things that you shouldn't be doing or don't want it. They're not in your wheelhouse. They're not in your strength. This is your chance to really become the greatest version of you. And so that's, a key distinction. And then I think multi-agentic AI is absolutely on the radar of a lot of readers
And what's
because
that? Yeah, sorry, what just define that word
okay,
again.
yeah. So usually it's about an agent, an autonomous agent. It's autonomous because it
All right.
doesn't
Yeah.
require human interaction. And so when you have these multi agents on your side, now you have these virtual teams. If you can coordinate them and orchestrate them and structure them in the direction of, doing some amazing work. So I think that's going to be the most important thing that a lot of leaders are figuring out is not just how will you use AI, but how will you use, AI agents as part of your team or organization or even to support you. And I always think of, in the future of AI, it's having agents that bring out your best, whether it's you as you in a team, you in an org, wherever you are, wherever you go. So I think it's always this dual pronged journey. It's bring out the best in future you and bring out the best in future org.
Okay. And again, just predictions, if you go 5 years ahead or 7 years ahead,
Mm.
how do you see AI changing? And do you think the rapid
So
change we've
I
had will continue? What's your take?
view. have an optimistic view that's based on the idea that we can finally actually become more human. We've had to
Oh,
do a
well,
lot of
tell me
jobs
more.
that
Tell me
are,
more.
yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great to be more human? But we've had to do a lot of jobs, very routine, very mundane, especially in the corporate arena. Your classic, think about all the classic jobs that really feel like routine operations. So
Right.
imagine when AI can actually do that. So then we move up the stack. And that's why this idea of figuring out, your most important different value, your personal
Yeah. Yeah.
strategy, the living your values, spending more time in your strengths. This becomes more possible the better that you learn how to outsource your strengths and delegate to AI where it makes sense. But then in order to do that, you really have to have a sharp focus on, what is it? Where can you give your best where you have your best to give
Mm.
in the service of others? If you keep answering that question well, you'll find very creative ways to use AI to augment yourself in a individual scenario, a team scenario, but it goes back to strategy too. Like, why even bother? What are you trying to achieve? But you're trying to realize your full potential through the lens of your unique value and your unique strengths. So it's a pretty powerful path, but you have to know that that is the path because you have to choose it and really choose a path of personal mastery. So like even through the corporate arena,
Right.
early on, I had some incredible mentors
Yeah.
and they pushed me to following the path of, it's called arete, but arete, think of it as beyond personal development. It's in fact my first mentor that exposed me to it. He said the idea is, imagine a beautiful garden in full bloom on a warm
Right.
summer's day. Like, it's you living your greatest possible you that you can become. So he inspired me. And arete is, becoming better in all aspects of your life. And it's not a perfectionist path, it's a growth path. So if you combine that concept, that idea with what AI can do, you're unstoppable. You're unstoppable.
Okay, and we'll come up to practical ways of doing that later. I
Yeah.
want to go back to the sort of strategy in companies. One of the things that I thought it was useful for companies, and they don't always do it, is to sort of position themselves. Are they using AI incrementally? Are they using AI sort of to make significant growth, or are they using AI to transform the whole market that they're in? And I think the approaches to each of them can be very different, but you need to think through at the beginning what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, can you give us some examples of using AI incrementally, using AI sort of more significant change, and using AI transformationally?
Yeah. And I want to temper everything with the idea that the future's already here, just not evenly distributed. I've seen everybody on like all
Like
different ranges. And so on the small end, the incremental end, it's about really optimizing, better, faster, cheaper, doing what you already do. It's taking a look at your jobs to be done.
yeah,
And, it could be as simple on the personal level as summarize this report for me, help me, learn this book faster, at that level. But then you start to go into the team level. And at the team level, it's how do you coordinate as a team better, faster, easier by doing, better, faster research. A lot of the John at the team level that could have been, painful in the past. So, unlocking that, opening that up.
right.
But the leapfrogs come from when you start to go into the space of imagination, when you start to go into the space of the art of the possible, as humans, it's very easy for us to shut down the future fast. We can have limiting beliefs, we can have negative perspective, and we could just shoot it down. We're good at that. Uh, what AI can help us do is explore those future stories, explore those future possibilities, explain to us how multiple trends come together to completely transform the future of health or the future of retail. And when we connect it back, when we hyper personalize it back to either ourselves, our team, our org, multiple levels, now we're on fire because now we have a path to extreme value that's, unhinged or unblocked in ways that might have been blocked before. Even better, what I found helpful with AI
Yeah,
is when people use it to chunk down those big futures. Because one of the challenges, okay, we got these big dreams and bold ambitions. That right there is going to change our strategies, right? It's going to change. It's a filter for our strategies. 10x thinking changes your strategies. But now when you go to get there, how do you get there? So AI at the speed of, I call it the speed of insight, but
Yeah,
AI at the speed of
yeah,
insight can very quickly chunk down into use cases, user stories, and bring those to life through narrative so we can connect with the narrative. And then as humans, and when we swarm together, we're better together when we swarm. When we swarm on this, we can start to figure out how we can make these bold ambitions come true. So that to me is the real leapfrog. It's working backwards from compelling futures, but making those compelling futures feel real. If you don't have empathy for these futures, then you're going to be disengaged from them. But if you can build empathy through stories and chunking down, pragmatic plans that help you get there, then you're going to have confidence and clarity in your future. That's the game changer.
yeah. Okay. And sort of building on from that, in an organization, who do you think is responsible for the success of AI, and who are the key enablers of it?
Okay, interesting question, but at the end of the day, the CEO has to be responsible for the question, how will we
Yeah,
use
yeah,
AI? But the reality is it's a disruptive technology. So, the chief technology officer would have to have their arms around it and have the right leadership levers. But what I've found, is, their best partner is usually the chief innovation officer, because they're going to have the charter, they're going to have the
right.
budget. But to pull this off and to really make this a real thing it's about creating a dedicated business unit. Go by different names. It
Yeah,
could be your AI Center of Excellence or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's a unit to drive the adoption across the board, to have a center of gravity, and to have a place that has the champions and create the culture and the mindset, reduce the risks, create the experiments. But that to me is how you get started in the game and how you get the right alignment. But so much goes back to how will we use AI, and ultimately the CEO has to stand behind that. And not just the CEO, but it's the C-suite. The C-suite has to be
yeah,
on board with a shared vision. And that's why, to your point, it's always back to the people. And this is where your stakeholder skills come into
yeah,
play,
yeah,
and
yeah,
getting people aligned with something. But you also have to realize that you're going to be pushed or pulled based on your industry and based on your customers. Do your customers expect to see AI to show up in your products? If so, are you late to the game? Are you already working on it, or are you already there?
no, absolutely, absolutely excellent. Okay, moving on from that, some of the stakes, risk, and rewards. So let's look at the other side of it. What are the risks of people not getting involved in it, in the initial term, medium term, long term? And let's look at it from a company and a people perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm again, we'll come to this a little bit later. When I did some analysis on people's views of AI, and this is sort of obvious in hindsight, but I found that those people that just did it, they just threw themselves in and they explored and they got some good results.
Yeah.
Those people that were working so hard in their day jobs, they didn't have time to take on anything new. So they said, sort of, this is a good idea, but we can't,
Yeah.
we don't want to get involved. And the third, and I found this fascinating, the third of the groups were, not only didn't they want to get involved, but they wanted to convince everybody else not to get involved in it. They were sort of the
Yeah.
even it's bad. And of course they may be right. So I'm not I don't want to diss them, I
Yeah.
don't want to diss them too much, but they had a passion to stop anybody else using it.
Yeah.
Which I find absolutely fascinating if you're running a company change project, and of course it's the same with all change projects. Is
Yeah.
how do you handle this? But we'll come on to that in a sec. But just to have a go at the question: what
Yeah.
is the risk for both companies and individuals who decide it's not for them, or
Yeah.
it's a passing fad, etc., etc.? So in the
Yeah.
short term, medium term, and the longer term.
Yeah. So, thinking back, I remember why did I go? I don't always go all in on a technology.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really
yeah,
don't. And I look back over the humps and hurdles and the big growths and disruptions, just operating at Microsoft. And I remember how digital transformation, you had your early, minority, you had
yeah,
your early majority, you had your laggards. And I know that there were a lot of companies that got disrupted or left behind, and there was no reason for that. They could have at least experimented and explored. There was no reason for that other than fear. Like fear held them back, or the status quo and comfort held them back. And I like to think of Peter Drucker's decision-making
Right.
approach. He
Yeah.
always puts on the table two extremes. And this is about the future. Like when he looks
Yeah.
into the future, you can have the extreme, adoption, AI is everything and everywhere to everyone. Or you have the other side, which it's no one and nothing to anyone. Or you have the truth somewhere in the middle. And he's usually he focused on being the truth finder of like, what is that truth in the middle? What becomes true? And I find that use cases tend to drive what becomes true.
Right.
For example, like you may not want drones in your neighborhood dropping off pizza, but would you love drones out there fighting forest fires and saving lives? Probably. So the use case matters a lot. And then when I think about AI and the risk like of not adopting, that's exactly almost like the FOMO, fear of missing out. I was worried
Yeah.
about, okay, what if I don't get on board with this AI? But I realized the smartest thing I could do was kind of twofold. It was I could reduce risk by trying to find better, faster, easier ways of what I already do, or I
Right.
could also experiment and explore what could I do differently, completely different next? How can I disrupt myself? So I looked at that from both those
Yeah.
perspectives,
Yeah.
using disruption as a means of de-risking. I didn't want to be disrupted by somebody else. So I thought, okay, let me embrace the technology, find out how I can use it, find out how it's always a game of exploring it and exploiting it. But I find that if you don't build the muscle, if you
Right.
don't build the mindsets, the skill sets, the tool sets, your ability to disrupt with a disruptive technology is pretty low. And the chances of you getting disrupted with something that's this significant is pretty high. And I sanity check that by checking with I've always been a platform and a systems and an ecosystems guy at
Yeah.
Microsoft. And what's helped me is learning from the leaders that tend to be correct over time. So, I paid a lot of attention to what were AI leaders saying, who is using it. And when you see, notes on LinkedIn about how, Satya using it every day and like finds it indispensable, or how, Brad Smith using it, in his day to day, and you see how leaders are adopting it, and really leaders of the future, or leaders who are, I don't want to say future proof, because I don't want to be future proof from the future. I want to be future ready. Is it right?
Right.
Yeah, I want to
Right.
be future ready. So, these are the mindsets that help them, be able to leapfrog where it's possible while de-risking from disruption, while getting better at business as usual. Because you always have these two tracks. You got your businesses, run the business, and you've got your change the business. And they need to inform each other. They need to be connected in some way, shape, or form, but they shouldn't ruin or kill each other. That's really the big idea. So when it comes to the risk game, if you can, run your business better, faster, easier, while
Yeah.
exploring your future businesses today, your future business now I think that you're firing on all cylinders. You're having an accurate and informed view of what it can mean for you. Because that's the other thing. You can have the greatest technology, but as we said in our group, it's business before technology. You don't want to have the tail wag the dog. You want to
Yeah.
make sure that you're leading in the right way. And one of the most helpful, it's very simple, but one of the most helpful mental models that I tend to use is a business strategy pyramid. So at the top is bold ambitions. So what are those big, bold ambitions, acting as a North Star and pulling into the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah.
And then in the mid-level is your business models. A lot of people running around with AI and making AI do stuff, but not really considering what's your business model behind that, so you have a future business. And then operating model, in the last. And the trip up or the mistake that I see people do, I'll use the example with digital transformation.
Yeah.
First of all, digital transformation, uh, a lot of people optimize. They put their spreadsheet in the cloud and they said, did I do digital transformation? I'd be like, no, you haven't digitally transformed unless the market feels your change. It's about the market. It's about customers
Okay.
feeling the change that you created. Otherwise, you're just doing optimization or internal navel gazing. And that's a trap that's easy to fall into. But when you can, lead with your ambitions, supported by your business model, and then reinforced and translated into better, faster, cheaper, optimizing your operating model. That's a really good, simple focus that kind of cuts through a lot of noise and helps you de-risk your future doing business before technology.
Okay, I like that. I mean, I have to say, one of my clients had a fairly, what I thought was a simple idea that to me made a lot of sense. They split the project into three. They looked at the customer journey and how they use this stuff for the customer journey. They then looked at their internal big system, supply chain, and all that sort of thing to look at how they could make them more efficient. And then they had a third stream saying how they could empower people. And I quite like as a simple approach that sort of, you can work at many levels, but at least you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I have a pattern for that.
Yeah,
I call it the CEO pattern.
all right.
Customers, employees, operations.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I use that to guide innovation, because a lot of people would say, all right, I want to go innovate. Where do I even focus? And that's where I use the CEO pattern. So transform the customer experience, the customer journey, address pains, needs, and outcomes, jobs to be done. Then employees, transform the employee experience, because now you have your chance to create a much, better place where people can have, facilitation through meetings, guided through proven practices, spend more time in their strengths, less time in their weaknesses. And then operations, when I go to operations, this is where I think of Stephen Covey. Right. I think he had a really good mindset around be efficient with things, but be effective with people. And so when you have that guiding everything that you do, now you're making better choices. But when you zoom out, and I think this is the key to always succeeding, you have to zoom out. When you zoom out, you can get a glimpse of the future informed from your past. When you zoom out and get the balcony view, you can kind of take a look at this, topology. But if you zoom out and you keep top of mind customers, employees, operations, you're keeping the right things in focus, and you're shaping a lot of times, what's going to be your North Star? It's going to be your customer's future. One of the questions I like to use to guide the future is, what will your future customers pay you for? What will your future customers pay you for a year from now? What will your future customers pay you for 3 years from now? When you use those, now all of a sudden you've got this relentless lens, and it's going to be a very sharp, laser cut right through all the technology chaos and bring you back into, how do you realize the full potential, not just of you, but realize the full potential of your organ business?
Okay. Another question that people have thrown at me that I'm quite sympathetic with is, a company taking on board AI in a transformational way any different from any transformational project in the past? Are the basic rules of how you run a transformational project, have they changed with AI, or is it the same stuff?
So there's a lot of enduring ideas that are evergreen. In fact, I like drawing a lot from how does McKinsey drive the adoption of a disruption, technology? And you can use, classic patterns, whether it's 3 horizons or a portfolio of initiatives, all those are helpful. But because we're dealing in the arena of intelligence, and it's kind of changing the game of how we, rethink work. Now, one of the guiding rules that I use is that I know that imagination, when I first heard the quote from Einstein, that imagination is more important than knowledge, I was like, yeah, BS. I'm from Jersey. That's not how this works. And, but what I learned over time, thank God, like being on Satya's innovation team, I got to see how people created the future, and I got to create and shape the future by working backwards from what seemed like dreams and impossibilities. Thank God, Martin Luther didn't say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. That's bold and inspiring. And that's how we as humans, create and shape our destinies and the future world. So, that's what keeps me real, is actually using imagination to shape the future. Why? Because knowledge can limit us. If we're only doing what we already know and what we've already done, we don't know necessarily how to solve our future. But when we reactivate our skill, and it's a skill, it's really a skill, the skill of imagination, we get to explore, expand the art of the possible, and shape the future in ways that we've never done so before. So in that way, I think that it's a bit different because we have a technology for the knowledge space, like for real. But I'm always a fan of what's the
Yeah.
hyper trend behind a lot of this. The hyper trend that's going to transform everything, I think, is this hyper personalization. It's how people can get over barriers of the past, learning things, a challenge, now put in any way that you need it so you can understand it and use it. That's a very big game changer. And I don't know all that that means yet. I just know that that's one of the most disruptive patterns everywhere is the hyper personalization that AI enables.
Okay. Let's go back to being really practical. Thank you for the imagination bit, which I think is hugely important, especially at the moment. But let's take it to people that are maybe a bit overloaded with the possibility and go, yeah, I understand all this, but what do I actually do? And
Yeah.
so I'm interested in some simple tips people can take that will at least start them on the journey. And I'd like to look at three groups. I'd like to look at the wrong word, but the people that haven't got there yet and going, shock horror, what the hell do I do with this?
Right.
To the people that are, they've taken on the journey and they're doing well, but they're still a bit overloaded because there are so many, it's like unlimited possibility is no possibility. And then the people that are at the front of the game, but are still, they're actually getting a bit tired. Because they've been doing all this stuff and they're going, where does it end? What do I do next? So let's start with the absolute beginner, the guy or girl that is a little bit scared of this stuff. They feel they're getting left behind. Where would you recommend they start? What's some very practical things they can do to get on the journey?
So first of all, for you to unleash your full potential, I'm a fan of framing it as mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets. Mindset, skill sets, tool sets.
Yeah.
So if you think about the people that unleash the greatest, augment themselves the best with AI, what do? They think of AI differently. It's the mindset.
Okay.
Some may think of it as a smart intern that learns fast and may do silly things. Oops, there's a hallucination. So that's like a big deal. But changing your mindset of, oh, I'm not going to go find the one hit wonder magic, prompt of 1,000 characters long. I'm going to treat it like an intern that's learning. I'm going to use it.
I love it. I love it.
So as soon as you adopt that mindset, you separate yourself from so many folks doing silly things with the magic one hit prompt. So like that puts you in a different place. Then the other thing is to look at it as, how do you work on you, like you're thinking with AI? So AI becomes your thinking partner, your thinking buddy. That's the metaphor that I used earlier.
Right.
And how do you get over your potentially limiting beliefs or biases? So here's what happened to me is I noticed as I was doing some art creations with Midjourney, I was seeing some pretty not so funny biases and in action. And then I got curious, I bumped into biases my whole life, but then I actually got frustrated. I'm like, why do I keep randomly bumping into them? Where's my map? So I ended up creating a library of 200 biases, cognitive biases. So I could now have the language for it. I could find my way through it. I could know what I'm subject to. And then as soon as I did that, I realized that one of the most important biases we all hit every day is confirmation bias. Basically, okay, you prove what I already know to be true, and then I don't learn something new because I'm seeing, through the lens of I'm confirming what I already know.
Right.
That's a dangerous trap. You have to realize that one of the best lessons in life is don't believe everything you think. And unfortunately,
I love. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm reflecting that because we could say, "Don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you feel."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. True.
No,
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Good insight.
So we'll either intuit. Do I believe what my intuition says? But let me throw it back to you. You just stimulated some thinking. Please carry on.
Okay. Good. And that's the idea. But as soon as you have this idea that, oh, maybe my thinking might not be right, this opens up. This is where your world opens up with AI. So what have we learned? Edward de Bono, one of the greatest thinkers ever, 50 plus books on the art of thinking and creative thinking too, and lateral thinking. He learned that any person So this isn't special people. This is any person, anybody, anyone can think better if they explore perspectives.
Oh,
So how many
yeah.
people actually explore perspectives, or do they come from their perspective? And a lot of people may have the, the black hat perspective, or the, the cynic perspective. They're coming from one perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens when you realize that, okay, anybody can think better by exploring perspectives? Now you're curious, what are these other perspectives? And you can choose your own palette. I created a framework called Think 360, but it's similar to Edward de Bono has 6 thinking hats.
Yeah.
And each hat is a different perspective. There's the data perspective, the facts and the figures. There's the feelings perspective. There's the positivity perspective. There's the action perspective. When you take these perspectives and you explore them, and you can actually create empathy with them, because now you're open and you feel safe, psychological safety. Now you're thinking about things in a much better way. You're not making a biased choice or a one perspective choice, but you're exploring it. And so AI can help you explore those perspectives. So now imagine how your thinking changes. So you're changing your mindsets. It's your, a smart intern. It's your thinking buddy, your thinking partner. You're exploring perspectives. But now here's the whammy.
Yeah.
Well, frameworks exist for a reason. If you think about, Charlie Munger, right-hand person for Warren Buffett, 90 mental models. I kind of laugh because when he said he had 90 mental models, I've been collecting them for more than 20 years at Microsoft and beyond. So you can imagine, I got a lot.
Yeah.
But what was important to me was that he said that his smartness, he was known for being smart. His smartness didn't come from himself. It came from it was a learned skill of using frameworks and mental models to do that. So guess what? Guess who knows all these amazing frameworks? Your friendly neighborhood ChatGPT, your friendly neighborhood AI. So here's a very pragmatic scenario. Some of my friends were stuck with their sales pages, and I'm like, look, I'm not a sales guy, but let's see if we can do something that's going to kind of rock your world. Let's see what we can do if we bring frameworks into the picture. So I said, give me 15 minutes. So I went cuddled up with ChatGPT and said, all right, let's do this. And, but you have to know some things. So for example, I happen to know that hook story offer is how Russell Brunson troubleshoots, charge like $100,000 a day. I knew that hook story offer was the framework he uses to troubleshoot sales. If you know that, and you know the framework, well, I go to ChatGPT, let's create a hook story framework, for selling, product X. I knew enough empathy because the target was, Microsoft leaders, Amazon leaders, Google leaders, blah, blah, blah. I had enough empathy for it. I knew their pains, needs, and outcomes. By feeding this into ChatGPT and using the framework, by the time I was done with the sales page, I really wanted, I wanted to buy it, and I even knew what it was, but it was kind of funny. It was kind of ironic. So the meta lesson here, and I'm a meta guy, but the meta message here is use frameworks to completely change your ability to think better, faster, easier. By the way, a lot of times I use better, faster because I'm inspired by Bionic Man.
All right. Okay.
If you remember the show, and so that that keeps me motivated. But now, so you're on fire. But let's make sure we recap this, because this is the foundation for your future.
No,
so you change your mindset.
Yeah.
Your mindset is focused on, you're going to be, your thinking buddy, your smart intern that learns. Great. You know your biases, and you continue to learn your biases, but confirmation bias is the worst one because it shows up in your language. Hey, ChatGPT, why am I so awesome? Well, that's a very different question than ChatGPT. How would you describe JD? So your language,
fascinating. Yes.
Yeah, your language is going to change your responses. And then if you can use these thinking frameworks and come to learn and practice frameworks, I've shared some frameworks on my site, but I've got a massive catalog that I continue to grow. I have an internal library of more than 30,000 notes, but frameworks have been my forte at Microsoft to help people and teams. What's important about a framework is not that it just helps you think better, but when you have a framework, it turns any challenge into a team sport, because we get to externalize it, we get to make it a process, we get to look at it together, and we get to explore perspectives together to learn better, faster, easier around challenging domains. So it turns tough things into tough team sports together. So that's how you. In fact, but I want to give you a very concrete test to do today. Something simple you can do with the prompt. simply in your prompt, ask ChatGPT to explore 7 possible futures of you. 7, just
Yeah.
7 just for fun, and have it write a story of your ideal day in the future. And just to start out, I would say, play with both 3 years and 1 year, but, 7 years in the future, actually do 1 year. When you first do it, just do 1 year out, and, have the 7 stories optimized for different things,
Okay, sorry,
you
just
know.
one clarification in question there. What do you need to get the best value of that? ChatGPT knows different things about different people. So would you give it some sort of brief of who you were, or would you assume that it already knows?
I like to be surprised. I like to be open, and I don't like to have like, a fixed mindset of what it
Right,
might already know
right.
about me. So I test it fast. I would just go in, play out 7 different futures, tell me a story of my ideal day and see what pops out. And
Okay,
it may have good detail, like when you wake up, here's your morning routine. It may have the people in your day, the meetings that you have, the value that you create, blah, blah, blah. And then shape it from there. This goes back to the idea that this maybe the idea of intern wasn't strong enough, but the idea is that you have to iterate with AI, iterate with GPT, not the one hit one. First, you just might be absolutely wowed, or you might be like, that's not really me. Then feed it some info
I
and
like
then
it.
start to play with it from there. But be fast with it. Don't overthink and don't try to find the ultimate, prompt. Instead, test through this loop, experiment, see what you get back and tune it. That's a far better, far faster way of getting more consistent, usable and useful results out of AI than trying to get your prompt right up front. I will say this though, it can help, and it can help a lot that, one of my friends, an insider in AIM, taught me this. He said,
Yeah.
think of AI as this infinite solution space. A lot of places, a lot of ways you can go. Um, Give it scope or a place to start from by giving it a role. So, for example, it could be a scientist, or it could be, you might sometimes, if I'm doing marketing stuff, I might say, "Hey, you're Seth Godin." So,
Right. No,
pick your
I like
favorite
that. Yes.
superheroes, and you get to learn how they might think about the challenge in a different way. But it also starts, the AI process from a different place. So, like, if you want a more sciency response versus a more fictional response, or made up or more creative, you can kind of set the zone for it. And I think that's actually something really important. And then one of the habits and practices that I've used is like when I was trying to think through taglines, I'm a big fan that slogans and taglines give you focus. They separate you in the market.
Yeah.
So I would have like 7 different board of advisors. So, all right, I'm trying to work through my slogan or my tagline, and you're going to be Tony Robbins, Seth Godin, Simon Sinek, and
Yeah.
pick your favorite team, and look at how different the responses are, but also notice a pattern. I noticed that AI kind of hones in on what's the values. The values will show up in the responses that you get from each person. Because if you think about everything we do in life, in business and in life, is we really ultimately drive through our values. Our values are the ultimate lens. May not be very conscious of them, but values are there driving why we do what we do.
Yeah. Okay. We've sort of started off with somebody start. We got quite advanced actually, but we've started off with somebody starting. Let's move on to what tips would you have to somebody that is already fairly proficient or proficient at using that to sort of push their skills or to
Yep.
enjoy moving their skills to the next level?
Yeah. So absolutely find ways to disrupt yourself. And
Lovely. Yeah. Give me
yeah.
some examples. Come on, I can't resist this. Give me some examples.
So I've seen people change careers pretty quickly in pretty powerful ways by using AI as a hyper personalized coach.
Yeah.
And so going from one industry to another industry, like going from restaurants into retail, for example. So they're building on something that they might be good at, like, customer connection or customer focus. But then they're learning how to think about the art and science of retail, and they're leapfrogging ahead because they're jumping into what are the most advanced skills and how do I practice those. It's a tiny little thing. Notice how I said how to practice versus how to
Yeah.
learn. I made that shift maybe like, I don't know, like 5 years back. I realized that I'd fallen into the pitfall or trap of reading books to learn. And I realized what set me apart early on was reading books how to practice. So I went back to my my model of making sure that as I learn insights, I'm translating those into things of like, well, how do I practice this? How do I practice this skill? And if you're ever stuck, that's the beauty. You should never be stuck in your life again. Not with ChatGPT. You should never be stuck.
Okay, no,
You
I
should
like it.
always,
I like it.
yeah, just ask it. How do I practice? How do I practice this? So
Okay.
don't just summarize a book. How do I practice this book? Turn that book into practices,
No,
and that's
no,
going
I
to
love it.
transform your
Now,
life.
now move forward again. You've got somebody that's really good. How would you, if you were coaching somebody that was really good to get better at this stuff, how
Mhm.
would you approach it? What would you, yeah, how might you approach it?
I'm a big fan of working on fantastic futures and really achieving those or lighting those up through your unique strength. In fact, there's, like the third level of living is basically giving your best where you have your best to give in the service of
Yeah,
others.
yeah,
But to do that, and why the service of others, it compounds your impact. But how do you really do that? You have got to know what your strengths actually are. You have to be able to distinguish that and make sure that, okay, here's my unique strength. Here's what I'm going to do. If you combine that with your fantastic futures, now you're able to um, transform yourself in ways you didn't expect. And you can also play with practicing. This is one of the lessons I
yeah,
learned late that I wish I would have learned
yeah.
early is boldness. I didn't have enough boldness in the way that I did things. And I kept getting the feedback from different people that I knew were giving me honest feedback. They're like, well, when I talk to you, like you're more bold, but when I like read your writing, it doesn't like go out there to where
Okay,
you could go. And so I had to figure out how the hell do I practice? How do I learn boldness? And so the first person comes to mind. This is kind of funny, but the person that comes to mind when I say boldness was Richard Branson.
all right,
And
yeah,
I read his books, listen, screw it, let's do it, and listen to his audiobooks. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to practice Richard Branson Fridays at Microsoft. Didn't tell anybody. I just decided that when I came in on Fridays, I would make decisions and act as if I was Richard
sure,
Branson.
yeah,
And I acquired, and it was really important at this time because I didn't consider myself a storyteller, but I had to be a storyteller for Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. So I'm like,
yeah,
how am I going to tell? So I'm not a storyteller. Like, that's not me. What the hell do I do? By practicing the Richard Branson Fridays, when I showed up to the meetings that mattered, when I, wrote the notes to Satya of like distilling things, like
yeah,
I came from this place. And what I found over time was by almost like Halloween, if you dress up as a character long enough and act like a pirate, you become a pirate. So I was able to take on this Richard Branson boldness and make it a part of me. You have to make it a part of you. Like if it's not you, you will continue to reject it. But when it let me play with possibility and be more courageous with some of the ideas, be more bold in, thoughts, actions, it completely transformed what I was capable of. It redefined who I thought I could become. And it led to some crazy, amazing things, like lots of different crazy stories. Like in one example, I got asked to be a head coach for a TV show targeting 400
right,
million people. And before my head wouldn't have gone there. My imagination wouldn't even go there. So if as a person that's advanced in your stuff, if you work on the boldness piece of it, a lot of times it's the lack of courage that may be holding people back, or their identity. I call them the identity habits. It's
right.
the identity habits holding you back. You break through those, you transform those. That's how you leapfrog in life into futures of possibilities that you just can't even imagine today. But you got to practice. You got to practice.
No, great. Okay, we're sort of coming to the end of what we do. What I'd like you to do is to sort of take a step back, very top level, for the people that are listening. How would you summarize what you've talked about almost in a few words? I know this is a delightfully impossible question,
Yeah.
but how would you summarize what what are the 1, 2, or 3 takeaways
Yeah.
you'd
Okay.
like people to leave with that if they left with them would help them?
Yep. Okay. So think of AI as your thinking buddy.
Yeah.
Practice it. It's a skill that you have to build. You have to build your skill of using AI, getting over your confirmation biases, limiting beliefs, hallucinations. So use it for that. And ultimately disrupt yourself to transform yourself. Find ways to do bold new things, explore and expand your art of the possible to become what you never imagined you could, so that in the end game, you can become the greatest version of yourself. And so that your org or business can become the greatest org on the planet that it can be. Good for people, good for the planet.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank
Um,
you.
would you like to, as I say, when I write this out. We'll put some notes out so people have got your website and all that, and LinkedIn and all that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
any quick tips of how people can contact you if you're interested, if you're interested. But I will write it out so people know.
Yeah. So the easy one, or easier, unfortunately, my name's complicated because it's, Meyer. JDmeyer.com is a couple other. I have sourcesofinsight.com and gettingresults.com. But then the place where I tend to share a lot of, key insights in a social way is LinkedIn. I've been creating, mini master classes, infographics, and I focus on high performance innovation and leadership with the
Right.
ultimate mission of helping leaders change the world their way. And when people go, well, I'm not changing the world, you can change your world under your feet, in your backyard, doesn't matter. Grow up, grow out, scale up, scale out, inner world, outer results. But yeah, that's really it.
I like that. Inner world, that's a very good place to finish. Inner world, outer results.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Really appreciate it. And thank you, JD. Brilliant as always.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yep, my pleasure.